Good evening. I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Let's get right to what America's talking about. A civics test. When presidents raise their right hands, they pledge to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. But Donald Trump is apparently keeping his options open.
Don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said.
The exchange was over deportations and due process, which several judges have ruled Trump's actions are indeed unconstitutional. But this is a notable moment in politics, since for the right, for decades, they have made America's document the centerpiece of its governing and moral philosophy.
This is a pocket copy of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. I've spent 40 years of my life studying this.
Because I believe in this document written by the hands of wise men raised up by God to that very purpose.
The Constitution starts with the three most important words outside the Bible: we the people.
Didn't you take an oath to this, the Constitution of the United States? Doesn't this supersede everything else?
Our Constitution is the supreme law of the land.
Every decision that I make starts with asking the questions, is this constitutional?
This is not a prop, and I don't carry it as a prop.
Joining us in our fifth seat at the table is attorney Dante Mills. He is a law professor at Temple University. Dante, I don't think it requires a law degree to understand what the Constitution says. Is it just me? It seems like that's kind of a cop-out for just the plain text, which actually, if you're conservative, that is how they read the document.
The simple answer should be, I will follow the Constitution, especially if you're the president of the United States. But I want to have a logical conversation. And there's a quote that Donald Trump said. He said, I was elected to get them the hell out of here, and the courts are holding me back from doing so. That shows his rationale. He thinks that the courts are acting against him, but the court's job is not to advance or to fight against the presidential policy. It's to make sure that they interpret these laws with fairness. And the one thing the courts do that I think President Trump is missing here, the courts determine or look at, what if you're wrong? What if they're not a criminal? What if they're not a gang member? What if they're not an immigrant? They're an American citizen, and you put them in jail anyway, and all of that has happened. The impact of that far outweighs the time it would take to just have a hearing. And that's what due process is.
So here's the deal. We've let 20 million something people into the country illegally. And now what a lot of folks want to do is use the court system to try to stop as much as possible the rapid deportation of illegal aliens from the country. What the president said in the interview was very clear. He was unsure on these deportation cases because of the unusual circumstances, but he was going to defer to his brilliant lawyers and said, quote, we are going to follow what the Supreme Court says. There is no outrage here that's worth it. But we have been invaded by millions upon millions of people, and he was elected to get them out. He was elected to get them out. And what some people are proposing is a backlog system that will never allow us to go to get them out.
You're describing illegal immigration, which has been around for a long time as an invasion, which is fine for you if you want to do that. But why is that unusual that there's a process to go through to deport people? I mean, that's actually just how the system works.
Do you know how long it takes for this process, this paperwork to get people out? The guy that we've all been weeping and gnashing teeth over, the guy we sent to El Salvador, was in the country 14 years illegally.
But what about what
We've
Dante,
got millions of people who have gamed this system, and now we're going to give
Either
it
you
some more.
believe in the Constitution or you don't.
I believe in the sovereignty of the United States, or you don't.
But
So you don't believe in the
believe in the Constitution?
I believe in the sovereignty of the United
So you
States,
don't
and I
believe in the
believe we've
And
been
you don't
invaded.
believe that Donald
Can I just
Trump
ask a
should
question?
abide by the Constitution?
Just a serious question.
Of course I do. And of course I
Do
believe.
you believe that he does?
And I believe that he will follow, just as he said, what the Supreme Court says. But the policy debate is worth
From
having.
the very beginning,
millions upon millions of people are here, and they will not leave, and he has to get them out.
always
I agree with you with
believed
that, Scott.
in executive
Hold on a
overreach.
second, Dante. Let me just let her
Always.
finish.
From the very beginning, from 2016, he has believed in executive overreach. We've all seen that. He said it. It was clear. Are you saying now that you don't believe that he believes in executive overreach?
I believe that he believes his mandate from the American people is to solve illegal immigration. And I would ask you the same question in reverse. Did Joe Biden, when he said he would faithfully uphold and execute the laws of this land, not mean it when he decided to let millions upon millions of people into the country? Because he did not execute the laws.
I thought that you were going to squirm out of that question.
I'm not squirming.
And yes, you did. And that's why I prepared for it, because I want to read you something. At the core of Trump's candidacy is a call for greater executive authority with willful disregard for the constitutional limits placed on our chief executive. Trump especially promises to force individual companies to do things he wants them to do, or else he promises punishment to those who displease him, which appeals to the miserable man at the airport bar. Do you recognize that?
Yeah, I wrote it.
Exactly.
And here's the deal.
He hasn't changed, so what has changed about you?
And here's the difference between then and now. This country has been invaded. The president was elected
So
to
you
end the
changed your
invasion.
opinion on the Constitution?
My opinion is the president needs to pull every lever he can to solve illegal immigration.
So you've answered that question by saying that you don't mind him being unconstitutional.
That every immigrant here is the same. You can't believe that because
Yes.
they're not. They're not.
I do.
There's some good, there's some bad. There's some criminal,
I
they're
believe,
not.
I believe
And how
everybody
do you-
who's here illegally
hear
is
this
here
out.
illegally.
How do
Not
you
all are
differentiate?
violent, but all are here
But
illegally.
how do you differentiate if nobody gets a hearing, if you don't have due process? How do you distinguish one from the other?
Well,
so what you're saying is every person that's here in this country is a criminal, is a gang member, should be thrown in jail.
Every person who's
That's
here
what's
illegally,
happening.
every person who is here illegally is in fact a criminal. Some of them do come here and commit violent crimes
Some of
and
them, but
still
how do you
aren't
differentiate
deported.
if you don't have a
Well,
process?
some have records and some don't.
But they
I'm
still
here to
have
break the news.
constitutional rights.
They're all going
hold on a
away.
second.
Still have constitutional
I want to make
rights.
sure that we're not straying from the point of this conversation, which is a question about due process rights. And so I'll just ask really quickly, do you believe that undocumented immigrants have to have due process rights, that that's constitutionally what they are entitled to?
I'm unsure of what that means in the context of some of the cases that we've been dealing with in the news lately, because I've been looking at these people who have been here for 14 years, have been through numerous immigration courts.
All right, well,
I have a question about what does that mean?
All right.
Yes,
Let
I
me-
agree,
let me-
but what does it mean?
Let me bring the Supreme Court into this since you brought them up. This is what two different Supreme Court justices have said about this issue in the past.
Do undocumented immigrants have the 5 freedoms? Oh, I think so. I think anybody who's present in the United States has protections under the United States Constitution.
The 14th Amendment, it doesn't speak of citizens. Some constitutions grant rights to citizens, but our Constitution says person. And the person is every person who is here, documented or undocumented.
Batya, I wonder why it's so difficult to understand a pretty simple concept. If Trump wants to deport illegal immigrants, he can do that, but he ought to do it legally. Do you think that that is a fair thing to say at this moment?
I do. I do think the media is pulling another, dictator for a day hoax right now, because it's clear when Trump said, I don't know, what he meant was what he finished his sentence saying, which is, I don't know where the Supreme Court is going to come down on whether deporting these illegal migrants is constitutional or not. It's very obvious, yet every single headline...
You just called it a hoax, so let's just play. Can we play it again in the control room, what Trump said in response to Kristen Walker? We're getting it up right now.
Can I make another
you need
clip?
to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said.
What's wrong with that?
So the Supreme Court is going to decide what is constitutional and what is not. And Trump just committed 100% to following what the Supreme Court says. I want to make one more very quick point.
There's another clip. Do we have the other one where he talks about whether citizens deserve due process? If we do, let's play that one.
Your Secretary of State says everyone who's here, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Do you agree, Mr. President?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Well, the Fifth Amendment says
I don't know. It seems it might say that, but if you're talking about that, then we'd have to have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million trials.
So can I respond to that?
Yeah.
So what does it mean for an illegal immigrant to have due process? We would all agree that they do not have the same level of due process that we do. For example, we are entitled to a jury trial, and they are entitled to a hearing before an immigration judge. Do you know who the immigration judges work for? They work for the executive branch. They work for, which means that they work for Donald Trump, which
you're
means
actually
that he
making
is
a
in
great,
charge
you're making a great
of the due
point.
process that they get.
But Donald Trump doesn't even want to give him even that due process.
That.
I mean, I think
he
that's
said
part of the problem.
He is not sure the level to which they are entitled.
She didn't ask about what
process,
level of due process.
That's a very basic statement.
No, I mean, the reason I'm jumping in here is because she did not ask him should they have a jury trial? Should they not have a jury trial? She just said whatever process they are entitled to. If they're immigrants and they're in an immigration proceeding, then yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a different type of proceeding. It's actually more of an administrative proceeding.
It's a much lower
but
standard as well.
Still, even still, they are trying to circumvent that minimal amount of due process.
Then why does
and
it
the
take so
question
long?
is,
let me give you
why?
an example. I'll give you an example. In the example of Kilmar Obrego Garcia, I believe he already got his due process.
Yes.
He had a deportation order. So for Trump to be asked, does that man deserve more due process? I think the answer is absolutely not. I don't want another dime of my taxpayer dollars to go to. He was not supposed to be sent to El Salvador. He had a deportation.
Let's put Kilmar Obrego Garcia to the side for
but
just
I'm just using him as an example
I know that you are.
of someone who
but I
Trump
also
could
think
very
that,
legitimately say does not need any more due process.
Well, it's not Trump's decision to decide that. I think that's the end of the story, is that it's not Trump who decides when the due process ends. It's a process for a reason.
Or to unilaterally decide this person is good, this person is bad, because I saw a picture of fake tattoos or whatever it is. You have to have.
They're not fake, by the way.
But he literally committed to following what the Supreme Court says.
But why the Supreme Court has said bring the man back, and he still has.
That's not true. They said facilitate, which is different.
Facilitate. Okay. So I love when people wrestle. As a writer, I love when people wrestle over terms of art.
Has he facilitated it?
They said they would accept him back. I mean, they've made that pretty clear. But that's different than effectuate. It's different than, is it not?
There was no legal standard for facilitating. The Supreme Court said that for a reason, because they could not mandate it, because what if it costs going to war or something? The Supreme Court doesn't have the power to authorize that. That's why the Supreme Court was limited to facilitate, because they could not mandate him.
Stephen Miller says the right of due process is to protect citizens from their government, not to protect foreign trespassers from removal. Due process guarantees the rights of criminal defendants facing prosecution, not an illegal alien facing deportation, Dante.
Well, I think we just heard from two very well-respected Supreme Court justices that said there's no distinction. If you're in America, you have the right to due process. The levels can be different, and in fact it is. If you're an immigrant, you're not entitled to the same legal standard that someone else has to prove if you're a citizen in criminal court, which makes it easier, which means he should be willing to say, I have proof that this is a person that needs to leave this country. And if you show that in a court, it's determined, or a hearing, then they have the right to leave. You have the right to remove them. But you can't just randomly pick people and say, everybody's bad.
Not random.
Everybody's bad, so everybody's out, no matter what.
Well, some of them have been random. I think that's why we're having this conversation.
Right.
There have
Absolutely.
there's a lot of documented evidence that people have been picked up. The only evidence against them is the existence of tattoos. And that is exactly why due process exists. And I mean, we can talk about Kilmar Obrego all day long, and I think that's a worthy discussion, but you cannot ignore that the other types of cases are happening, and that's one of the reasons why this is in court.
Yeah, and not only that, I want to push back on something that you said about, well, what he meant was, it feels like we play that game with him a lot. He is saying and looking at us and saying and answering the question exactly how he was asked it. And so when we get into this whole, well, he didn't really mean it that way, it's giving him a free pass to basically play these kinds of games.
He was very clear.
You heard him commit to follow the Supreme Court,
He said,
right?
I will follow the Supreme Court,
You heard him
period.
commit to
You
that,
heard him.
right?
He was asked about the Constitution, correct? He was asked about the Constitution.
He was
And
asked about the specific issue regarding Fifth Amendment rights and due process rights. And then he said, we're going to follow the Constitution. We're going to follow the Supreme Court.
Unfortunately, with him, his actions are so loud, it's hard to believe him.
The reason I wanted to play that is because I think Jemele is right? I think it's actually pretty disingenuous to suggest he didn't say what he said. She said to him, Kristen Welker, the Fifth Amendment says that they do have due process rights? And he says, I don't know. It seems it might say that, but if you're talking about that we might have 1 million or 2 million or 3 million trials,
yes,
look,
it's a legitimate position.
In this country, we teach high schoolers to read the Constitution. Why is it that the standard for the President of the United States seems to be lower?
He has a legitimate policy question about what kind of process it takes to get someone out of the country. He's looking at millions upon millions of people sitting here, some for years upon years going through endless systems, endless paperwork,
but Scott,
and he's asking a legitimate question.
It
is
not
totally legitimate.
A policy question. It's a constitutional question.
Because
it's not, because they're not saying
because you just said there's different levels of due process.
Absolutely.
And he's asking, do you have to give them this level, or do you have to give them this level? And what's the Supreme Court ultimately going to say about that?
He's putting people on planes and sending them away without giving them any kind of hearing.
Well, I agree with Batya. The person that's been in the news had plenty of hearings and plenty of time.
I think it's apparent to people at home that it's easy to divert to Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Well, he's in the news every day.
I understand that. But I mean, the broader principle is what's at question here. And that's actually what he was asked about, was generally speaking, do people deserve to at least say, hey, that's not me?
Right. Absolutely.
Right. That's a pretty basic question. If someone came to you and said, oh, Scott Jennings, are you the Scott Jennings from Colorado who committed a murder? Wouldn't you want to raise your hand and say, Your Honor, that's not me?
Well, I'm not a foreign terrorist, and I didn't come here illegally.
Everybody in this process is not either.
How do you know if they're a foreign terrorist if you don't ask the question?
In the case of Garcia,
you get it
we
wrong?
know.
That's the.
But you're pointing to one case and ignoring all the others.
We also have to address this point you keep making about how long it's taken the pace of the deportations. It wouldn't have taken so long if Donald Trump had not killed the immigration bill that was going to provide more judges to help facilitate more of these things. You can't have it both ways and say it's taken a long time,
more judges,
and also
more
we're not going to put. So more planes, more prisons in
we'll never get them all out.
The
message is clear.
America.
We will red tape this to death, and we will never get rid of the invasion.
So you don't want to. So you run over the Constitution because you're tired and you want to go faster.
In El Salvador or whatever, and they didn't do anything wrong. It was the wrong person.
Right.
Would that matter to you?
I don't think Garcia was the wrong person.
It shouldn't matter. We're
not
talking about one person.
Either, right?
We're talking about generally. It can happen if you don't have due process.
I would care if it was the wrong person, but in the case of Garcia, I have no doubt it was the right person.
So put him to the side. Put him to the side. If the wrong person is sent, it shouldn't matter. And the only way to make sure it's the right person is to have a process.
Are they here illegally? Did they have a deportation order? Did they beat their wife? Did they get picked up for
Without
human
a process,
trafficking?
we don't
Tell
know.
me.
You know what, Scott? Actually, I think that you're, again, if they have a deportation order, that's actually a different circumstances. A lot of these people, maybe most of them, who they tried to deport under the Alien Enemies Act, it's not clear that they did. So that's part of the problem as well. Look, past presidents have deported a lot of people.
Yes.
Many, many people. And they've done so under the law. So I don't think it's impossible for Trump to do the same.
I think we're living in an unprecedented situation.
All right, Dante, thank you very much for joining us. Everyone else, stick around. Coming up next, while the president has been obsessed with dolls lately, Mattel is now saying that because of his tariffs, Barbies are going to cost a lot more. Plus, Trump wants to reopen Alcatraz, one of America's most notorious prisons. Is this a good idea or just a pipe dream? Another special guest is going to join us at the table.